Hey everyone, so I'm back and I want to talk about a few of the fights on the undercard. Obviously in my last video I just thought about the main fight, there was so much to go over, but there are a few fights I wanted to touch on from the undercard. Now the main one that I wanted to talk about was Buatsi and Hutchinson. Now Willie fought really well, he did. He was impressive, he would have walked away from that fight with new fans and he did have success, but overall Buatsi was just so impressive for me. He was really clever with his pressure. It's easy with a fighter with Hutchinson to just rush, for the fight to get a bit chaotic, for you to fall over your front foot, for you to take your hands down to your chin and kind of overreach. But he didn't do that at all. He stayed so switched on. When he moved forward and applied pressure with his feet, he always had his feet underneath him. He always took his hands back to his chin, which might sound like a basic thing. But when you're applying that kind of pressure, these things are so important, and he did it so well. I also mentioned before that maybe that animosity in the lead up to the fight and that kind of and that spite might um help Buatsi, and I think it did. He looked like he wanted to stop Hutchinson from the very first round. Um, really impressive, really, really impressive. But like I said, Hutchinson did have success. There was a few times where he opened up, he let his hands go, and Buatsi lost his shape. He found it pretty much straight away and went back onto that game plan of pushing forward. But Hutchinson did have success. Um, the scorecards for me were a bit crazy. I'm not sure how anyone could have had Hutchinson winning that fight. It's a little bit worrying, to be honest. But this is boxing. And then going forward from that fight, you've got to ask what is next for both fighters. Hutchinson, he's going to go again. So young, so much talent, and he's only going to get better, in my opinion. That would have been a great learning fight for him. Buatsi, that fight puts him in line for the winner of Bevil Beterbiev. Now, looking at that performance, as great as it was, it's hard to see how we would handle Beterbiev or Bivol. They're both so different. Beterbiev is like that lava that just keeps coming, that's going to get you slowly, slowly, slowly. He's going to get you. He applies that pressure. He's the king of it. And then Bivol is kind of that rhythmic master. He's in and out. He kind of keeps you guessing the whole time. You don't know what's coming. He's got these long, fluid shots. So that's a fight I'd love to see. But then also, being a Brit, another fight I'd love to see Buatsi in is with Yard. Now, I have no idea what's going on with Yard. It's a fight that everyone would love to see. It would be an amazing fight, but who knows what's going on there. I haven't seen anything come from the Yard camp for a while, so who knows. I haven't seen Frank Warren say anything about it either. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, that was that one. Another fight I wanted to mention was Josh Kelly and Ishmael Davis. Now, in the recap to this show, I kind of said it's a real shame I was looking to the Smith fight, and I was, but Davis has got a big task ahead of him because he's coming into the fight with such short notice, and he was. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Kelly ever looked like he was in that much trouble up until maybe the last round of the fight, but watching that fight, Davies is going to come out of it with fans, and he's going to come out of it with respect. He put a good showing for himself, considering he hardly had any time to prepare. But I don't think, I'm just sitting it, I don't think anyone watching that fight is going to sit there and go, yeah, that Josh Kelly would have beat Liam Smith. I just don't. Because as much as Kelly is an extremely awkward fighter to box, over the 12-round period, and someone who's experienced in 12 rounds, as Liam Smith is, I feel like they're just going to get to him. Because even in the end of that fight with Davies, he kind of got to him a little bit. So I'm wondering going back home after that fight, I'm wondering what Kelly's going to be thinking. Yeah, I kind of expected him to do a little bit more. I expected him to outclass him. I wasn't sure that he was going to stop Davies, but I thought maybe we'd see a bit more sparkle. Don't get me wrong, there were moments where he had his, typical Josh Kelly moments where he'd open up and he'd look kind of really slick and sharp, but there weren't that many of them, and he didn't do enough damage, in my opinion. So yeah, that's my takeaway from those two fights. Obviously, Shiraz was unbelievable. Not much to say about that fight. He kind of blew Denny out of the water. So that leaves us asking what's next for Shiraz. Surely he has to step up, and I think that's what he wants. But yeah, it was a great undercard. Great undercard. There's a few other bits and pieces floating around in the boxing news. One of the bits and pieces I wanted to mention, because I think it's really interesting and quite exciting, is apparently Dana White now is jumping into boxing. Obviously, this is the man that is kind of in control of the UFC and has done so well with that. It's a funny one because being in my little boxing bubble, I always thought that boxing was the number one combat sport in America because it is in the UK. And then it wasn't until not long ago when a few Americans told me, nah, over in America, the UFC is the number one combat sport, which really hurt my feelings. But it would be interesting to see Dana White over in boxing. I'm assuming he would come over as a promoter. I know he's had some involvement with Turkey because he helped out in that last UFC event. So yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what he does. Um, Surely it can only be good for the sport. Let's see.